In this video, we're going to tell you the full story behind Marvel's angelic Angela, an angel out of Asgard. The superhero, who would one day be known as Angela, actually started life as the daughter of Asgard's rulers, the All-Father Odin and the witch Freya. They named her Aldrif Odinsdottir, and they also happened to be the power couple's firstborn child. But ascending to the throne would be a tall order for Aldrif, if not completely off the table. That's because at the time of her birth, Asgard was having some major conflict with the so-called 10th realm, also known as Heaven. And that's Heaven without an A, which can be basically described as Marvel's version of the afterlife. In any case, Aldrif ended up becoming a bargaining chip for one of Heaven's head honchos, the Queen of Angels, when she abducted the baby in hopes of leveraging her against Odin. The deal was Odin had to concede defeat, where the Queen of Angels was going to take out his and Freya's firstborn daughter. Doesn't sound like a very heavenly thing to do now, does it? And if you know the Allfather by now, you're aware that he's not the kind to let some kid mess with his authority. So Odin refused the Queen of Angels' proposal. True to her word, she went on to take out the newborn Aldrif. Eventually, Odin would sever Heaven from the rest of the 9 realms, and even Yggdrasil too. But back in Heaven, the Queen of Angels thought her job was done. Aldrif was no more, so she handed over the child's seemingly lifeless body to one of her ladies-in-waiting, L'Oreal, for disposal. L'Oreal, however, found out that the baby was still alive, so she took it upon herself to take the infant in and raise her as one of Heaven's angels, dubbing her Angela. Now, you should know that Heaven's angels aren't the cute kind that play harps and frolic in fields of clouds. The best way to describe them is that they're pretty much the 10th realm's version of Asgard's Valkyries. They're an elite warrior class within Heaven, trained in the field of combat, strategy, and everything that comes with it. Now, Angela's childhood was pretty tough, especially considering that she was constantly bullied by her other angels in training due to her having no wings, point of pride for the 10th realm's inhabitants. To make matters worse, L'Oreal suddenly just up and vanished one day. But our girl's a trooper if nothing else. Angela would ascend the ranks of the angels by the time she grew up and was even given the title of the leader of the hunt along the way. At one point, Angela received an assignment to aid the group of the 10th realm natives called the Anchorites by dealing with a monstrous creature wreaking havoc in their temple. There, she met an Anchorite named Sarah, who would end up helping Angela in her battle against the beast. Angela felt a debt of gratitude towards Sarah after that. In exchange, she'd help Sarah fulfill her dream of leaving the Anchorite's temple. The two women would find themselves living together. Angela and Sarah would partner up for their own adventures. During one of their quests, the two ladies came across a godlike being called a Hierophant. Now, the Hierophant was angling to send Sarah back to her original place in Heaven, the Anchorite Temple. So it tried to strike a deal with Angela in order to do this, information about L'Oreal's whereabouts in exchange for Angela returning Sarah to the Anchorites. She refused the bargain and instead decided to fight the Hierophant. Angela won their duel, leaving a vengeful, godlike entity to swear vengeance against her. In the aftermath, Sarah was surprised that Angela didn't take the deal. In response, Angela told her best girl that there was no way that she would send her back to the Anchorites. Oh, on top of that, this particular chapter in their lives made the two ladies realize how much they truly loved each other, as both Angela and Sarah pretty much started to become a romantic couple right after this. Their love story ended on a bitter note though, as Sarah would lose her life during one of their adventures. At the time, Angela desperately looked for a way to return her to the land of the living, or Heaven, but none of their attempts worked. So goes the story of this Asgardian angel. Angela's Expulsion. Now, the mainline Marvel universe was besieged by the big cybernetic supervillain Ultron at one point in the long history. This culminated in everyone's favorite mutant berserker Wolverine doing some time-bending shenanigans to stop the robot from messing with the rest of the Marvel U. That ultimately worked out, but it had with it some unintended consequences. Specifically, Wolverine's actions caused a tear in the fabric of space-time. Angela got taken away from the 10th realm as a result, and she'd find herself in Midgard, aka the realm where most of the other Marvel superheroes reside. An absolutely fuming Angela thought that the one responsible for her expulsion from Heaven resided on planet Earth, so she made a beeline for the big blue marble. This put her in the Guardians of the Galaxy's crosshairs. Peter Quill and the rest of his trusty crew would confront Angela, and as you'd expect, a classic superhero v superhero fight happened between the two parties when they first met. But as these things go, Angela and the Guardians of the Galaxy ended up becoming allies after the Asgardian angel explained her side of the story. From there, the Guardians would help Angela reach Earth as she continued to look for the way home. Not long after, Angela got her wish when the Asgardian god of thunder Thor and his stepbrother Loki managed to open a gateway that led to the 10th realm. But Angela's homecoming wasn't all peaches and cream, as she witnessed her fellow angels defeated at the hands of her biological Asgardian brother. But take note, Angela still had no idea about her family tree at this time, so Angela and Thor had themselves in a fight, with the god of thunder taking an L against his sister. Angela was just about to strike Thor down, but Loki intervened and advised her not to do it. And don't be surprised, because Loki did the most Loki thing during this adventure and decided to align himself with the 10th realm, which explains why Angela listened to him. Now, we won't go into too much detail about what Loki did there, but what you should know is that Thor ended up becoming a prisoner of heaven while his Weasley brother acted as a double agent for Asgard. In any case, Thor tried to escape his confines, which then put him in another direct confrontation with Angela. The two threw down once more, and the god of thunder got one over Angela during this one. Thor was ready to give Angela the definitive blow that would end her life when their dad Odin appeared. Odin realized that Angela was actually his firstborn child, leading the All-Father to offer her a spot in Asgard. But Angela refused, telling her real dad that she already bought into Heaven's whole idea that Asgardians were the bad guys. On the other hand, Angela was more or less a fish out of water at this point. That's because she also knew that she had no place in Heaven given her Asgardian roots. So from then on, Angela decided to just strike out on her own and travel all the realms. During one of her adventures, Angela was taken aback when none other than Sarah appeared right before her, seemingly alive and well. Angela had doubts, thinking that one of her enemies was toying with her. But soon she came to realize that it was actually the real Sarah right in front of her after quizzing her lover with questions whose answers only Sarah knew about. Curiously though, Sarah had no idea how she was able to return to the land of the living. A traitor and a queen, Angela would have another run-in with her biological kinsmen, the Asgardians, when she abducted Lassa, who also happened to be her and Thor's sister. This led to the Odinson hounding her, along with a group of Asgardian agents. In turn, Angela and Sarah hopped from one realm to the next to evade their pursuers, which then eventually landed them in the realm of Vanaheim. The problem was, there's this Asgardian who has the power to see everything in the 9 realms. You probably know him as Heimdall. So to be sure that Heimdall didn't spot her, Angela and Sarah journeyed through Vanaheim to locate an artifact called the wedding dress of Ciri, which basically worked as a cloak of invisibility against Heimdall. Angela, Sarah, and Lassa would end up finding the wedding dress, and the trio would next find themselves in Midgard, specifically Earth's moon, where they'd link up with Angela's old friends, the Guardians of the Galaxy, who gave them refuge. However, a life of peace and quiet wasn't on the table for Angela, Sarah, and Lassa. That's because they, along with the Guardians, had to deal with a fringe group of Valkyries known as the Disir not long after finding their safe haven. Angela would carve up these warriors, but it was also at this point that the Guardians found out why their angelic friend was being hunted down. So Angela came clean and told everyone why she took Lassa from Asgard. It turns out that Lassa's lineage wasn't as cut and dry as it first seemed. The thing is, Odin and Freya decided to get freaky outside of their native realm and instead conceived Lassa with a so-called realm between realms. The problem was, this place also had the Asgardian sworn enemy in it, the fire demon Surtur. Somehow Surtur managed to get his DNA into the mix, which effectively turned him into one of Lassa's baby daddies. She's basically a shoo-in for an Asgardian-themed episode of Jerry Springer. As for the reason Angela decided to kidnap baby Lassa, it was because she thought that Lassa would end up playing a part in the destruction of all the realms. The only solution to prevent this was to take her to heaven. The Guardians of the Galaxy weren't entirely convinced of this story, that is until Lassa literally turned into a flaming monster before their very eyes. So the group then traveled to the 10th realm only to find out that Asgard was having a skirmish after the Disir got them up to speed with what what Angela was planning. Angela and Thor would have another rematch during this encounter, which only came to a halt when Thor realized Angela wasn't out to destroy Lassa, but rather to protect her, while Thor shouldn't have jumped to conclusions because the next thing he knew, Angela had just thrown Lassa into a furnace. This enraged Thor, of course, but double bluff, it turned out that Angela just hurled their baby sister into Heaven's furnace to use her flame powers to bring it back into operation. And to her credit, Angela jumped in after Lassa as soon as the furnace was ignited, saving her baby sister from a fiery end. On the other hand, this whole ordeal left Angela weakened, allowing Asgard's forces to capture her and Sarah to be taken as prisoners in Asgard. Shortly after, Odin would release Angela from captivity, but not before literally branding her as a traitor to their realm. And if that wasn't bad enough, it was also during this period Angela learned that her seemingly revived girlfriend Sarah wasn't the real deal. Angela would discover that the woman she was with this whole time was actually Malekith, a villainous dark elf, and according to him, Sarah's soul was sent to Hell after her initial demise. Sarah then met Malekith in that gloomy realm where she ended up telling her whole life story to the Dark Elf. In turn, Malekith used all this information to impersonate Sarah in hopes of using Angela as one of his pawns in his quest to take over all the other realms. But this ultimately fell flat when Lassa came into the picture. Angela's tense conversation with Malekith ended with him teleporting himself away. On the other hand though, Angela would come up with the idea to get the soul of the love of her life out of Hell. Soon enough, Angela made her way through Hell and its defenders until she eventually found her way back to Sarah. Unable to contain her feelings, the first thing she did was plant a passionate kiss on her late lover's lips. Unfortunately, this wasn't the Sarah Angela once knew and loved. All she got in exchange for showing her affection was Sarah's ire. So Angela apologized instead and focused on the more pressing matter, getting Sarah out of this super depressing realm. This way was way more complicated than simply taking Sarah by the hand and breaking out of Hell. In fact, the only possible method of bringing Sarah back to the land of the living was to amend the laws of Hell itself. And to do that, Angela had to be the ruler of the realm. This meant she had to challenge Hell's ruler, the goddess Hela, and take her place. Angela knew she didn't have enough juice to confront Hela in a straight up fight, so she first needed to get much needed power boost. Angela did this by passing a trio of trials, which she was able to do so with the help of Sarah and a newfound companion named Leah. Shortly after, Hela and Angela would have their much awaited fight, and the Asgardian angel ended up with the W. This effectively turned Angela into the rightful queen of Hell. As you'd expect, she used her powers and authority to not only revive Sarah, but even assign her as her royal consort. And while let's just say Angela was pretty good at this whole Queen of Hell thing, aside from accomplishing what she really set out to do, Angela also made some much needed updates to the realm's status quo. For one, she was able to free Heaven's angels from the curse that Freya placed on their kind, where they were doomed to have their souls automatically sent to Hell whenever they fell. Also, she did right by Leah, allowing her to change the girl's fate. On the other hand, Angela decided to resign from her position as soon as she was finished making the progressive changes in Hell, leaving the Asgardian god Balder as its regent. Things seemed to look up for Angela during this period because it was also around this time that she learned the woman who raised her as if she was her own, L'Oreal, was still out there somewhere alive. Angela and Sarah would then move back to Midgard and settle in New York along with their new pet, the Hellhound Thori. Trouble soon followed when Angela and her friends had to deal with the Faustian Queen. Now, the Faustian Queen was actually an alternate version of Angela from another dimension called Earth 311. Now, the OG Angela, Sarah, and Thori teamed up with Leah and Jane Foster for this one. And on a side note, this happened back when Jane was acting as the Asgardian god of thunder of the mainline Marvel universe. This whole fight ended up with Leah coming up clutch to save OG Angela and her other friends' lives. In the aftermath, Leah would leave the group along with Thori, while Angela and Sarah's relationship blossomed further. A champion through and through, Angela's next adventure veered away from the usual mystical themes when the Brotherhood of Badun abducted her. Again, Angela would team up with her old pals, the Guardians of the Galaxy, to put a stop to these villains, with Angela even threatening them with the full might of Asgard in the whole process. Afterwards, Angela came back to her and Sarah's home, only to find out that the love of her life had disappeared. What's more is that the complete stranger had since started to rent out their apartment while she was gone. The guy didn't have any idea where Sarah was, much less who Angela was even talking about. However, Angela had to postpone her search for Sarah because she immediately got roped into another cosmic adventure. This time, Angela pretty much saved the entire world without most of the heroes of the Marvel Universe even knowing about it. Specifically, our girl came into confrontation with the one and only Mad Titan himself, Thanos, who was aiming to wreck the world. But with a simple, well-placed threat invoking all the 10 realms, Angela was able to make Thanos change his mind and stave off Earth's destruction. Next, Angela found herself in a place much weirder than outer space or heaven: politics. You see, Loki got the idea to run for president in the United States, and Angela was hired to be the God of Mischief's bodyguard. But her employment under Loki didn't last long. Angela ultimately found out that Loki was the brains behind the whole staged Hydra invasion to boost his credibility. So our hero decided to take this information to the press and cut her ties with Loki. In the end, Loki thankfully didn't become president of the free world, and Angela even got rewarded with a lifetime supply of Daily Bugle issues for her efforts in outing the scummy candidate. Angela's next adventure came in the form of the War of the Realms storyline. It was also here that she came face to face with Malekith once more, and she knew how to prioritize, so Angela finally got to looking for her missing lover, Sarah. In the process, Angela met Kid Loki. Now don't get confused between OG Loki and Kid Loki. They're actually two different characters, each with a backstory of their own that we won't get into here. But what you should know is that Kid Loki and Angela managed to strike a deal where the boy god would help Angela look for Sarah in exchange for her help acquiring a magical horn called the Nafalgar Beacon. You see, Kid Loki was angling to use this artifact in the war between the realms. From there, Angela found a new team called the Asgardians of the Galaxy, made up of herself, Scourge, and Valkyrie, among some others. Long story short, Angela and the Asgardians of the Galaxy managed to grab the Naglfar Beacon. On the other hand, Kid Loki did honor his end of the bargain by delivering Angela and the other Asgardians of the Galaxy to the living planet Ego. There, Angela discovered that Sarah had joined the Ravagers, a band of space pirates who may be rough around the edges but are actually good guys to their core. Angela tried to convince Sarah to go back with her, but Sarah decided to stay with her fellow Ravagers since she felt that she had found out her true calling as a member of this group. So Angela respected her lover's decision, and they decided to go their separate ways. Angela and her group then went on to rejoin the ongoing war between the realms, which eventually saw our hero coming into confrontation against Heaven. Angela ended up taking out nearly all the angels of the 10th realm during this battle. Sometime later, Angela teamed up with the heroes like Winter Soldier and Spider-Woman to form a group called Strike Force. Their main adversary here was Viridai, mystical villains out to wreak some havoc on the world. Angela's next outing hit closer to home than her previous adventures, because in this one she had to take part in a bit of family drama when Thor ascended the Asgardian throne. You see, Thor was having a pretty bad time in this new role, which prompted Angela and their mom, Freya, to help the all-new Allfather settle into it. Trouble soon came knocking at Angela's doorstep, and this happened when the primordial god of hammers started ravaging all the 10 realms. In response, Angela and the Asgardians banded together to put a stop to this menace, which saw Odin providing the ultimate sacrifice to save reality. On the other hand though, Mjolnir was destroyed during this epic battle, which is instrumental in bringing forth the God of Hammer's downfall. In the aftermath, Thor was forced to go into the Odin's sleep to recover his strength after defeating the God of Hammers. Meanwhile, Angela collected the fragments of the broken Mjolnir and brought it to Heaven so that the angels could bring it back together again. The last time we see Angela was when she attended her biological father's funeral. And on that note, Odin was sort of still alive given that his essence had transferred to Thor's magical hammer.